We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you a little bit of bowl preview. Loaded episode. Got a Gasparilla Bowl coming up on Friday, so go do the bowl preview a little bit earlier than normal, with the game being on Friday and not Saturday. And then a lot of news, of course. We'll get into the news first, because the bowl preview would take the longest. Austin Barber, offensive lineman, coming back to the Gators. TJ Searcy hitting the portal there for the Gators. He won't be playing in this Gasparilla Bowl on Friday. So, hey, lots to get into. Some more transfer portal news as well. As that's just hot and heavy. Not so much good news for Florida today. So kind of wait for that. But that's kind of where we are at right now. So everybody hit that like button. Subscribe right here on Gators Breakdown. Watching that YouTube version. Those likes really, really help us out. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And then as well, of course, keep that conversation going on that Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. Link is in the description to join that. Also get those ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown. All right, so let's get to it here. Let's get to the news of the good news. The great news of Austin Barber returning for the Florida Gator offensive line. And that's coming off the great news. Just the last episode we did on Monday. This was announced on Tuesday. On Monday, All-American Jake Slaughter announced he was going to return to Florida. Damieon George also returning. So, barring any surprises of Najee Harris, Florida should be returning 4 of the starters along this offensive line, having their starting left tackle, left guard, center, right guard returning for 2025. Great news for a group that really, really come a long way this season. It progressed a lot as the season progressed. Barber started all 12 games, played a total of 664 snaps with a pass block grade of 70.2, according to Pro Football Focus. For Barber, he brings a ton of experience back, of course. He's played in this offensive system for the last 3 seasons. Of course, going back 2 years ago, Billy Napier's first year, played right tackle right there beside Osiris Torrance. Then last year, switched to left tackle and was banged up a good bit. Toughed his way through it. Returned this year, played and started every game there at left tackle there for the Gators. So certainly a strong point of this offensive line. So Slaughter revealed that he was coming back on Monday, and Barber admitted that played a role in his decision. Of course, he said, I think me and Jake are really good friends, and we talk a lot. I'm just excited to be back with him. We've been on this journey going on 5 years now, so I think that's going to be fun with him. We're going to do a really good job together. That's what he told On 3. So, look, I know we'd like more action in the transfer portal, but this goes hand in hand with it as far as roster retention goes. This side of it costs money as well, and it keeps numbers on the roster limiting spots hitting the portal and guys going to the draft. That's to keep these guys either from going to the draft or going to the transfer portal. That's going to cost as well. And to me, it's a positive move this cycle for Florida. Gives Florida a great foundation in the trenches for that 2025 season. You got the offensive line coming back with 4 of those guys. Caleb Banks on the defensive line. You can really tell that there was a focus on retaining players in the trenches where it's harder to replace those guys in the portal. It's paying off so far. A lot of numbers right here coming back in the trenches for Florida. 5 trench players, 4 on the offensive line, Caleb Banks as well. I like the move. I like the move. And especially, like I said last episode, before I move on a little bit, I hope this doesn't mean an exodus of the young offensive linemen that are in the program. I hope they want to stay and compete and develop. But that's the other side of this as well that we may have to take into account. Hopefully not. But with the way the portal is and guys want to play, hopefully they want to stay and compete. But that's the other side when you bring guys back. You may lose some young guys. We'll just have to see. All right, so peeking ahead a little bit, you got this great stable of running backs, a mobile DJ Lagway paired with this offensive line. There won't be much excuse not to be a good offense next season. You got a really good baseline. You got a really good foundation for what you're returning next year. Those skill players have to be happy. Oh, yeah, those guys in front of us, those guys blocking for us, those guys opening holes for us, 4 of them coming back. Okay. Now, that group can certainly take a jump. I'm not sitting here saying this is the greatest offensive line in Florida history or anything. They made strides this past season. There's another step for them to be more consistent in pass protection. DJ Lagway did help them out a bit, more consistent in opening holes for the running backs. But by season's end, this was a good offensive line. Maybe next year that could be a great offensive, and for the whole season. It was a rough start to this season. But with 4 guys returning, you at least, I think, now have a launching point where you probably get past the slow start as well. Eager to see 4 of these guys returning and eager to see what Florida does at right tackle as well. Do you turn somebody on the roster? Do you hit the transfer portal? It was going to be interesting to see. All right, let's keep it going right here. Some of the bad news on this Tuesday, TJ Searcy hitting the transfer portal. And look, not a total surprise, as we've said as much on this show since last week that this one was a possibility. Just finished his second season with the program, of course, after being named freshman All-SEC last season. Started 5 games, played in all 12 on the defensive line out there at that edge jack spot. Logged 34 tackles, 20 of them being solo. 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a quarterback hurry. He had a PFF grade of 70. He's the second edge player, of course, to play the jack spot and to hit the transfer portal, joining Jack Pyburn, of course, who just transferred to LSU. So that really only leaves George Gums Jr. as the only guy who has experience playing that stand-up outside linebacker jack role in this edge spot. Will Florida attack that position in the portal to help replace that specific role? Can LJ McCray, Aaron Childs maybe play that spot certain situations? Do you rely on freshmen in this regard as well? I don't think so. I mean, Jaden Wood, I know there's a lot of a good feeling about that. I just don't know if you want to have to rely on it. But hey, look, in this new world of college football, playing freshmen, it may be a necessity as far as keeping them happy, making sure they don't hit the transfer portal after a season or so. But also just because of a scenario like this. Florida had 3 guys. I'm going to assume George Gums comes back. He's the guy now. We'll see how many roster spots Florida has. I still think you attack the transfer portal here and see what you can get. You got to get a contributor. Don't reach. But I think you got to get somebody, who can be that combo, set the edge, help stop the run, but maybe get to the quarterback a bit better than what we saw from Searcy and Pyburn. It's going to be interesting to see who's out there for that role. Will the defense not use it as much next season, that role? Have more of maybe a traditional 4 down front? I think all questions I think worth asking here. The defense would have to change a little bit from what we've seen, of course. And we'll see, who's coaching that side of the ball if any changes are going to be made like that. So Gums, Searcy, Pyburn all wanted to play more. That was going to be tough to pay and play all 3 as much as they want. So I think you hit the portal, avoid having to play the freshman so much in the role to back up Gums. But we'll see. Maybe Florida figures out something with somebody else on the roster as well that's not a freshman and can kind of get creative in that role if you're not going to bring somebody in the portal. So just to kind of take a look here, let's take a look at this edge spot. And if you're on YouTube, you can follow along with the graphic, but I'll try to go through and what Florida was able to produce in that edge jack spot in 2024. So George Gums Jr. See, he's highlighted in orange. He's the one on the roster right now. Appeared in 12 games this season. Recorded 32 tackles, 4 quarterback hurries. He had 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 2 pass breakups and 1 fumble recovery. He had a PFF grade of 62.4. His 8 tackles for loss were second on the team. Now, out of this group, Gums, Searcy, Pyburn, he had the most sacks. He had 5 sacks compared to Searcy's 2, compared to Pyburn's 1. But he did have the lowest PFF grade, so take that for what it's worth. Look, I'm not saying that's gospel by any means. It's just one data point. But that was George Gums Jr.'s numbers: 32 tackles, 4 quarterback hurries, 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. Searcy started 5 games, played in all 12 as well, logged 34 tackles, so 2 more than Gums. He had 4 tackles for loss, so half of the tackles for loss that Gums had. He had 2 sacks, so 3 less sacks than Gums. He did have 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. He had a PFF grade of 70. Jack Pyburn saw action in every game this season. Starts in the last 8 games of the season. He had 60 tackles, so blow both these guys out of the water as far as overall tackles go. If I'm not mistaken, I looked it up. Gums played the most snaps out of these guys. I meant to put that in the notes, but I remember seeing that. But he had 60 tackles to Pyburn, 20 of them being solo, 4 tackles for loss, so he was still half of the tackles for loss as George Gums Jr. He had 1 sack, 1 interception. His PFF grade was 70.2. So there was your look at the Edge Jack production in this past season. We got one more game, of course, the bowl game to play. Gums will be playing in that. But, I mean, you could see the differences here. Gums in the backfield toward the quarterback a bit more. We all know Pyburn was the better edge setter, the more physical player, setting the edge, stopping the run. Seriously, I've seen this discussion a bit too. And credit to whoever had it. I've seen it multiple places too, but I saw it somewhere on Twitter, and I forget who it was. But maybe saying, "Well, I hate losing Searcy more than Pyburn because Pyburn maybe has reached his ceiling. Still not sure Searcy had reached his." I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. I think that's a way to look at it too. I don't know if that's true. Seriously, I do think, once again, I do think Pyburn was a better player, more of a plus player than Searcy. Losing both, it does sting. We'll see where it goes. So maybe the biggest thing here is, missing just 2 of the guys in the group. Losing Pyburn by himself, not that bad. Searcy, same for him. By himself, not that bad. But losing them both at the same time, and now some question of what's going to happen. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Very interesting to follow. Does Florida change some things in how they approach that position, how they use that position because of this? Or do they go out and get somebody to replace it to be that stand-up Jack outside linebacker? So something I wanted to do now, and I mentioned it briefly on the last episode, and talking about this 2023 recruiting class where Searcy was part of. And one we expected to pay heavy dividends for this program for Billy Napier. And out of 22 signees, 7 have transferred. The top player in the class, Jakeem Jackson. The second-ranked player in the class, defensive lineman Kelby Collins. The 8th-ranked player in the class for the Gators, TJ Searcy. 11th ranked in the Gators class, Gavin Hill. The 12th in Will Norman. The 15th highest in Andy Jean. And the 21st highest, Quincy Ivory. 6 of the top 15 players in the class of 2023 have transferred. When you look at the rest of the class, you start also seeing the standouts, the major contributors from this class so far. 4th ranked in that class for the Gators was Trey Wilson. 6th was Dejon Johnson. 9th in the class out of 22 signees was Sharif Denson. 14th, Jaden Robinson. 16th, Bryce Thornton. 17th, Aaron Gates. 18th, Najee Harris. 19th, Jordan Castell. 20th, Bryce Lovett. Of course, we want to see some more of him at the offensive line. 22nd in the class, the lowest ranked player in the 22 was Jacoby Jackson. So rankings not giving us the best the best evidence of who was going to work out in this class. Now, that could be misevaluation. It could be guys not putting forth the work. There's a couple ways to look at it, but either way, you'd want to, ideally, and in most classes, yes, your top players are going to be the ones that pan out when you stack them. That's what we've discussed in recruiting for a while. But in this class, I mean, you got 10 guys out of 22 playing meaningful, impactful football for the program. And in some ways, don't forget about other 2 guys that transferred their way in from that 2023 class, Cormani McClain and Pup Howard. Pup, of course, for that class of 2023, more of a contributor so far than McClain. But you add him to that list in some ways. So, 11 players in that class of 2023. 12 if you count McClain. We'll see what ends up happening with him. Have that interception versus Kentucky. We'll see how much he gets on the field next year. I think Florida's got a need at corner. Maybe see attacking the portal there as well. But if not, McClain's going to have to play next year and will need to play at an impactful level next year. There's a lot of guys in that 2023 class. While the top 15 may not have worked out, I mean, you got some depth for guys who are playing a lot of football for this team. All right, let's get to some other transfer portal news. We thought the decision was going to come on Wednesday, but it came on Tuesday, and that was a little hurt to the heart here. Zachariah Poyser commits to Miami. Discussed him a few times, and we had that revelation that Florida wanted him at star instead of true safety. I was told that really didn't affect his decision. I was told the Miami decision was coming anyway. So it was still supposed to be Wednesday, but it came out on Tuesday. Of course, the biggest question I had going back to the last episode, would that affect his decision where Florida wanted him to play star, not so much safety? I was told it really didn't impact his decision much at all. So Poyser just ends up liking Miami better, picking the Canes, of course. NIL, I'm sure plays along with it. But they got a need for safeties as well at Miami. So I'm going to go fit in there for the Hurricanes. And I think the first true loss I feel of this portal, if Denson stays healthy, Gates comes back healthy, I think Florida's just fine in this. But the question of Gates coming back healthy is certainly worth bringing up. I still would prefer to have Poyser at safety anyway, pure safety. Give some competition back there with Jordan Castell. But in the end, I think this can still work out pretty well for Florida, depending on the Gates timeline, if they wanted him at star. So this did at least tell us that the staff may be in the market in the transfer portal for someone to come in at a star and provide some depth. So interesting to see there that maybe we got that revelation there. Florida may be looking for a star spot as well. So maybe safety, star, edge, defensive line. I think still places you might see Florida attacking this transfer portal. And then some big news, of course, was waiting for this one. Wide receiver Zachariah Branch from USC, but also his brother and safety Zion Branch entered the portal from USC and are expected to choose their next school as a package deal. Florida will be in the mix early with the need at wide receiver and safety. But, for Branch, he does fit that kind of mold of some of the, I think Florida finds themselves having in the receiver room already with your Trey Wilsons, your Abrams, and Tank Hawkins, of course, your smaller speedster, speed and space type of guys. I still don't think I'm turning down a player like Branch. You add him to the arsenal if you can. So I think that for me, that's the way I look at it. But of course, that's going to cost a pretty penny. Do you throw money at something like that when you maybe don't? Look, you need it in the way of upgrading talent. Do you really need it in that type of receiver? You can see that. But hey, it's a package deal. His Zion should not look over him. A great safety in his own right there at USC. So would it be worth getting the package deal and getting Zion Branch to come play safety there? And you still get a really, really good receiver in the mix. Yeah, it's not that easy. But of course, 2 former high-profile recruits that on 3 is mentioning Miami, Michigan, Georgia, and Louisville, along with Florida as potential landing spots for the brothers. So we'll see how it plays out. Of course, comes out and said they played together at USC. We'll see. I would assume it probably ends up the package deal like they're saying. Maybe it doesn't, but we'll see. We'll see. Sorry, having to mute the mic and get rid of the sniffles a little bit. All right. There's your transfer portal update. Some more targets there hitting. We'll see what happens. We'll see what ends up coming out too about this with Florida being in Tampa for the bowl game that we're about to preview. Does the news slow down for the transfer portal? We'll see. We'll see. But plenty to get into. We'll see visits happening this weekend when the Gators get back into Gainesville. But speaking of getting back in Gainesville, it'll be because the Gators are in the bowl game in Tampa, the Gasparilla Bowl, Florida and Tulane. Let's get the preview going right here. The two schools match up for the 22nd time and first since 1984. After a 2-6-2 start in the series from 1915 to 1947, Florida has won 11 straight against Tulane for a 13-6-2 series lead. Of course, Tulane was a founding member of the SEC in 1933 and played their last season in the conference in 1965, leaving the conference in June of 1966. I think some people don't remember that. They were a founding member of the SEC, or the Tulane Green Wave. So Florida has an all-time bowl record of 24-24. So it can get over 500 right now. 48 bowl appearances dating back through 1953. The Gators are 8-5 in bowls since 2009 and 10-6 since 2006, going for their first win in a bowl game since the 2019 Orange Bowl. So, of course, you look at Tulane a bit, and they were deep in the mix for a college football playoff spot at 9-2, but losses to Memphis and then to Army in the AAC championship spoiled that. Tulane is 0-3 against Power 4 teams this season. Tulane head coach John Summerall at 80%. He's 32-8, has the fourth highest winning percentage among FBS head coaches. Only Oregon's Dan Lanning at 87%, Ryan Day at 86.8%, Kirby Smart at 85.2% currently have a higher percentage than John Summerall at Tulane. So let's pull up some stats right here. Go to team rankings and kind of, I'll say, before I used these when the bowl game was announced. And they throw out the cupcake games. It's FBS versus FBS stats, and still pretty good indication. So for Tulane, before we get into some kind of players for them, overall statistics for them. Points per game on offense, 35.9, basically 36 points per game. Now, of course, remember, and I know you guys will point it out to me, yeah, they play in the AAC. Their quarterback is not starting this game. I know. But this at least gives us a good barometer of now what they're missing with guys not playing. This is what they were during the season. Points per game, 35.9, 36 points per game, basically for Tulane's offense. Opponents' points per game for them and their defense, 21.3. That was 23rd in the country. Points per game for offense, 35.9. That was 10th in the country for Tulane. 417 yards a game for their offense, giving up 316. Yards per game for them, their offense, that was ranked 38th. Their opponent's yards per game was 316.7. That was good for 15th in the country. Yards per play, 6.3. That's good for 20th in the country for Tulane. Their defense only giving up 5 yards per play, good for 35th in the country. Third down conversion percentage, very, very good at about 51%. That was second in the country in the regular season for Tulane. Second in the country in third down conversion. 13th for their defense, giving up 32.4% of third down conversions. Red zone scoring, pretty good there. 41. Florida's defense in the red zone, of course, has been really good lately. Tulane scoring about 88% of the time in the red zone. That was good for 41st in the country. Opponent red zone scoring. Now, if you can get in the red zone, you've been able to score on Tulane this year. 105th in the country. 88.5% Tulane giving up. Got some more rushing statistics there. Tulane will rely on the run game. Yards per rush, 4.8. That's good for 37th in the country. On defense, giving up 4.5 yards per rush. That's good for 81st in the country. Rush play percentage, 62.6%. That's 8th in the country. Unless you know how much they want to run the ball. They are a running team and will be even more so because of what we've discussed now. The quarterback, starting quarterback hit the transfer portal. We'll get into that, of course. Rushes per game, 41.8. Rushed the ball about 42 times a game. It's good for 13th in the country. Rushing yards per game, 15th in the country, 202 yards. Giving up 143 yards rushing. That's good for 52nd in the country. Passing statistics, of course, as I said, pass play percentage, not going to be high up there with the run percentage being really high. 37%, that's good for 127th in the country. Yards per pass, 9.1. So when they do throw, they're getting down the field. 6th in the country at 9.1 yards per pass. Passing yards per game, though, 214 at 76 in the country. They're giving up 173. That's good for 8th in the country for passing yards per game on Tulane's defense. QB has been sacked about 5.7% of the time. 54th in the country. They sacked the quarterback about 8.5%. Good for 18th in the country. So there you go for Tulane. And a look at their stats. All right, so let's keep it going right here. Finish up this bowl preview. Damieon Mensah. He entered the portal. So former 5-star. Mensah was their starting quarterback. We'll get into more about him in just a bit. But Ty Thompson, former 5-star, will get the nod for Tulane. This will be his first college start. He did play 11 games this season as a Wildcat change of pace quarterback to Mensah. Thompson averaged 6.1 yards on 40 rushes, scoring 6 touchdowns. He completed 6 of only 11 passes on the season for 74 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So the question, of course, we're going to ask is just how much does this offense change? I mean, it's got to change, right? It's among the nation's best in third downs, dominating time of possession. They do that very well. That's a big plus for them. It all starts with the ground game, so we know they're going to rely on that even more. Tulane is 9-0 this season when running for more than 150 yards and when out-rushing their opponents. They're 0-4 when it doesn't. So if they don't get 150 yards, they're probably not beating you. In 7 of the last 8 games, the Gators have not allowed an opponent to rush for over 150 yards. So that 150-yard marker could be the magic number. I don't think that stat will be as important for this matchup as running may be the only thing they can do. I mean, hold them to under 150 when they're going to rely on the run even more, I think, and they certainly lose. But if they get over that with little passing game, it's still hard to see them winning. Like the 150, it's been a good number for them. They'll win games when they get over 150, but they're going to rely on the run game even more and not be able to. I mean, we'll see what they do in the passing game, but if the passing game's not there and they rush for 175 yards, they're not winning this game. So they're going to have to, 150 yards. I don't think it's going to be really a magic number for them in this game. Mensah was responsible for about 2,700 yards passing, 209 yards a game, completing 66% of his passes with 22 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. Not that explosive, but kept the chains moving, keeping the ball in the offense's hands. That's what they could be missing. So if Thompson can't convert third downs, it's going to get Tulane out of their game plan. When Mensah set to miss this game, of course, probably more pressure will fall on running back Mekhi Hughes. Talented running back there for the Green Wave offense. Averaged north of 5 yards per carry, 17 touchdowns. Didn't break 100 yards on the ground in the final 3 games of the season, though, after doing so in 6 of the prior 7. He has run for 100 or more yards in 14 games in his two-season Tulane career so far. And then go back to John Summerall, their head coach, 25-0 in his head coaching career. Go back to Troy as well, when he outrushes the opposition. His teams are also 16-0 when holding the opposition under 100 yards rushing. So you see their formula. They're going to want to play tough, hard-nosed football. If you're Florida, you're in the big bad SEC. You've been playing well coming into this game. You see what they want to do. You can't let this team go out there, out-physical you. Go run the ball on you and win this game. It just can't happen. Play with your hair on fire like you have been to end the season. If the passing game gets going, or they try to get it going, Mario Williams, of course, is the wide receiver to watch. 54 catches, 940 yards, 17.4 yard average, 5 touchdowns, really good 80.6 grade on PFF, playing out wide 72% of his snaps. He can play slot too. It's a homecoming for him as he played at Tampa Plant, former number 1 wide receiver as a recruit, began his collegiate career at Oklahoma in 2021, made his name as a true freshman, recorded 35 receptions for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns in his freshman season. In 2022, he transferred to USC, continued to showcase his talents there. He appeared in 12 games, 9 starts, catching 40 passes, 631 yards, 5 touchdowns, and then here at Tulane now. Just really quick off the line, great change of direction, good option down the field, but can play inside as well. They'll try to get him the ball in space, making guys miss after the catch. Not the biggest guy, but plays like it. Just have to wonder how much he'll be limited without Mensa, a quarterback. And hard to really know what this offense is going to look like with Thompson behind center. So far, a pistol offense, also just a wildcat quarterback for the good bit of this season. Game plan, of course, likely try and dominate with the run game, protect their passer with easy play action, short yardage throws. Use quick. In this offense, we'll probably use very similar 1 or 2 quick reads, get the ball out of his hands, try to protect him as much as possible, limiting those long developing plays. They get the run game going and try to incorporate play action a bit. So just can't get that run game. Just can't let that run game get going. For this Florida defense, it's just about going back to what I just said earlier, continuing what we saw the last 3 weeks of the season. After allowing its most points, 49 in the game against Texas, it's been on a tear. In the past 3 games, Florida has combined for 34 tackles for loss, 18 sacks, 15 pass breakups, 13 quarterback hurries, 8 forced fumbles. I think FSU probably had all of those. No. 7 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, while only allowing 14.7 points per game. That's what the last 3 games have given us on defense. Florida jumped from 47th to tied for 7th in FBS and sacks, and went from 78th to tied for 24th in tackles for loss to finish the regular season. The 18 sacks and 34 tackles for loss were both the most in the FBS across the last 3 weeks of the regular season. In those last 3 games, opponents reached the red zone 7 times and only scored 14 total points. The other 4 red zone trips featured 2 fourth down stops, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 missed field goal. With 22 takeaways this season, Florida more than tripled its takeaways from last season with 7. 22 this year, 7 last year. It marks Florida's most turnovers gained, 23 since 2019. So that's what Tulane's got to face in that last handful of games for the Gators. Need to see it one more time to end this season. Cam Jackson, Billy Napier mentioned, limited in practice so far after his injury versus FSU. Now, remember, he came back out of that Florida State game, did play. So I would assume he plays in this one. Of course, Caleb Bates coming back. So the last time those two guys will be together with Des Watson up front for this Florida defense. Be interesting to see if Pup Howard gives it a go with that high ankle sprain. Now has some more time. Do you press that? We'll see. We'll see. All right, let's go to the other side. Defensively, Tulane, 4-2-5, typical defensive end, nose tackle, defensive tackle, bandit look for them along their defensive front. And they could go a few guys deep, or they could this season with a little drop off. They're going to need to prove that with some of the transfers that we'll talk about that are out already for Tulane. They'll give up some rushing yards. Kansas State gained 215 yards on the ground, averaging 6.6 yards. Oklahoma gained 182 yards on them. Louisiana, 175, averaging 6.3 yards a rush on them. They did do better in conference play, but took a hit in the season finale against Memphis, where the Tigers ran for 236 yards on them, 4.9 yard average. And then, of course, Army, 335 yards in the AAC title game, 5.9 yards a carry there. Different style of offense, of course. They're 88th in the country. It's Tulane's defense in giving up runs of at least 10 yards with 64 runs. 87th in the country in giving up 18 runs of at least 20 yards. So you can get some chunk yardage in the run game on this Tulane defense. They're kind of defensive edge linebacker Matthew Fobbs White. He entered the transfer portal. He chose Baylor. They'll be missing him. 6'3", 230-pound edge player. Total 24 tackles, 5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Started the last 8 games of the season for the Green Wave. He was the third highest ranked defender for their defense with a grade of 78.8. Also, defensive lineman Parker Peterson. He entered the transfer portal. He's chosen Wisconsin. 21 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks on the season. Was one of the top interior defensive linemen in the AAC, says Chris Hummer of 24/7 Sports. He was the 11th highest graded defender on their defense with a 70.6 grade. And then, I'm glad we cleared this up, it was reported cornerback Rayshon Pleasant entered the transfer portal, but he has since blasted an agent for the false rumor. He'll be on the field for Tulane against the Gators. Pleasant recorded 35 tackles, 3 touchdowns this season, 2 kickoff return touchdowns, and 1 interception return for a touchdown. Played his way into the starting lineup as a key contributor in the secondary. 6 foot, 185-pound corner, finished the year as Tulane's 6th leading tackler with 3 passes defended, 1 interception. One of those, a 100-yard touchdown on that 1 interception. So 100-yard interception return for a touchdown. He was the 19th overall graded player for the Green Wave defense with a grade of 67.3, but did have a coverage grade of 72.3. Cornerback Micah Robinson, that's who to watch for on this Tulane defense. Very high, 80.9 grade on PFF. Great at reading the quarterback's eyes, a willing and aggressive tackler. Shows great ability to break on the ball. A former wide receiver, so he understands route concepts. 2 interceptions on the season, with 1 being returned for a touchdown. 4 pass breakups. Longest catch on him went for 42 yards in the regular season finale versus Memphis. But before that, he didn't allow a pass longer than 21 yards. He's allowing 47.8% of targets to be completed on him. So just a little less than 50%. So the Green Wave also, they lead the nation in both non-offensive touchdowns and defensive scores. So got to take care of the ball, got to play well on special teams. Tulane paces the FBS and picks sixes with 5. So if you turn the ball over, as far as the interception goes, it might go for a touchdown the other way. And they're second in the country with kickoff returns for touchdowns with 2. So just kick it out the back of the end zone. Don't give them a chance. And don't be throwing no pick sixes and letting them stay in this game. They're going to be very, very limited on offense, I believe. But with 5 pick sixes on the season, that's something that's noteworthy. That is noteworthy. Tulane defense will be going up against a Florida offense led by DJ Lagway. Take a look at the special season one more time with the bowl game coming up. Lagway set to join Wayne Peace, Chris Leak, and Treon Harris as the fourth Florida true freshman quarterback to start a bowl game. Florida's 2-1 in those games. Florida is 5-1. Game started by true freshman DJ Lagway with the lone loss coming against Georgia, of course. He got hurt in that game. So, of course, that means Florida's 5-0 in games Lagway starts and finishes. The Gators are outscoring opponents 32.5 points per game to 17.5 points per game with Lagway at quarterback. 195 to 105 difference. Averaging 6.7 yards per play to opponents' 4.6 yards per play in the 6 games Lagway has started. 6.7 yards per play to 4.6 yards per play. Pretty good stuff. Here's some more regular season ending numbers for the Florida offense. Lagway leads all FBS passers with at least 100 attempts with a 97.3 passing grade on deep throws. That's 20-plus yards. He has totaled 14 big-time throws to just 1 turnover-worthy play on deep balls. Florida started a true freshman quarterback and running back in Lagway and running back Jaden Ball for the second time in program history in the Week 12 matchup versus LSU, and is now 2-0 with the only 2 FBS wins this season while starting true freshman backfield. Florida is one of 2 teams in the country with 2 qualified receivers averaging 19 yards per catch, and wide receiver Elijah Badger with 21.3 and Chimere Dike 19.1. The other school, East Carolina. Florida's one of only 2 teams in the country with 2 qualified receivers averaging at least 19 yards per catch. Pretty good stuff. All right. Yeah, as you can tell, picking this one, not really too hard, given the preview here. I got 34-13 Florida. Home game for the Gators, pretty much. Some key transfer outs for Tulane that I think just really going to do them in. It was a very run-heavy offense to begin with. Maybe they can lean on that anyway, but they're going to have to throw the ball at certain times. Don't think they'll really be able to do it. They won't be able to convert third downs enough on the Florida defense. 34-13. I think a pretty comfortable win for Florida. I don't know if the game you'll ever feel the game will be in doubt. But that'd be the prediction for the final game of the 2024 season, the Gasparilla Bowl. I think Florida would love to see. They was talking about all that explosion right there on offense. Some more fireworks here for this Gator offense and the defense that just comes out once again, ends the season on a high note. Give us a 4th straight game of just completely dominating up front. Keep the positive mojo there for what we see on the field. 34-13 Gators over Tulane. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Gators Breakdown. Any more news comes out, I'll try to hop on right here, give you the latest. But, of course, stay tuned. Friday night after the game, for the last post game of the season, we'll be reviewing Florida, Tulane, right here on Gators Breakdown. But that'll do it for this episode. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.